He's beautiful, Joe.
The year is 1917. America stands on the brink of entering the Great War. In the affluent neighborhood of Brookline, Massachusetts, inside a modest gray frame house at 83 Beale Street, a child is born who will one day change the course of history. His name is John Fitzgerald Kennedy, the second son of Joseph Patrick Kennedy and Rose Fitzgerald Kennedy. May 29th, commission. Then, in 1938, ambassador to the Court of St. James, the United States ambassador to Great Britain, the pinnacle of diplomatic prestige, the first Irish Catholic to hold the position. Jack graduates from Choate in June 1935. His yearbook entry notes his most likely to succeed as most likely to become a politician. The Kennedy charm is already evident. The wit, the ability to connect with people. But there is also something else, a quality that is harder to define, a sense that beneath the casual humor and the self-deprecating jokes, there is a young man thinking deeply about serious things. He spends the summer traveling in Europe with his friend Lem Billings. France, Italy. The continent is beautiful, but there are shadows gathering. In Germany, Adolf Hitler has been in power for 2 years. The Nuremberg laws have stripped Jews of their citizenship. The Spanish Civil War has begun, a preview of the larger conflict to come. Jack sees some of this firsthand. He reads the newspapers. He talks to people. He begins to understand that the world is changing, that the peace established after the Great War is fragile. That fall, Jack enrolls at Princeton, but he lasts only 2 months before illness forces him to withdraw. Another mysterious ailment, this one serious enough to require hospitalization. Hepatitis, the doctors say, or maybe something else. Jack's medical history is already becoming complicated, a litany of symptoms, and diagnoses that never quite add up to a complete picture. He spends the next several months recovering, reading, thinking about what comes next. In the fall of 1936, Jack enrolls at Harvard, his father's alma mater, his brother's current school. Joe Jr. is thriving at Harvard, of course. Student government, football team. Everywhere on campus, everyone knows Joe Kennedy Jr. Jack, once again, is the other Kennedy brother. But Harvard proves to be different for Jack than Choate was. He is older now, more focused, at least on the things that interest him. He joins the swim team. He plays football, though his slight frame and chronic back problems limit his effectiveness. He joins the Hasty Pudding Club and the Spee Club, the social organizations that define the Harvard social hierarchy. More importantly, Jack begins to find his intellectual voice. He is drawn to history, to political science, to economics. He is particularly interested in international relations. The world is moving toward crisis. In 1936, Germany remilitarizes the Rhineland. In 1937, Japan invades China. In 1938, Germany annexes Austria, then demands the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia. The Munich Agreement, brokered by British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, gives Hitler what he wants in exchange for a promise of peace. Peace for our time, Chamberlain proclaims. But many, including a growing number of Americans, are skeptical. Jack's father, as ambassador to Great Britain, is in the center of these events. Joe Kennedy is a controversial figure in London. He is an isolationist. He believes America should stay out of European conflicts. He thinks Britain cannot win a war against Germany and should seek accommodation with Hitler. He says these things publicly, causing diplomatic incidents. The British government is appalled. Roosevelt is embarrassed. But Joe Kennedy is a powerful man, a man with presidential ambitions of his own, and he speaks his mind regardless of the consequences. Jack travels to London in the summer of 1938. His father arranges for him to work in the embassy. Jack sees firsthand the diplomatic maneuvering, the fear, the sense that war is coming despite everyone's best efforts to prevent it. He travels to France, to Germany, to Poland, to the Soviet Union. He takes notes. He talks to people. He is forming opinions, but they are not yet his father's opinions. There is an independence of thought developing in the younger Kennedy, a willingness to question the assumptions of his elders. In September 1938, the Munich crisis unfolds. Hitler demands the Sudetenland. Chamberlain flies to Munich to negotiate. War seems imminent. Jack is in London, watching the British prepare for the worst. Gas masks are distributed. Trenches are dug in the parks. Children are evacuated from the cities. And then Chamberlain returns with his piece of paper, his agreement, his promise of peace. The crowds cheer, but Winston Churchill, then a backbencher in Parliament, warns that Britain has suffered a total and unmitigated defeat. Jack Kennedy reads Churchill's speech. He thinks about appeasement. He thinks about the price of peace. Jack returns to Harvard in the fall of 1938 for his junior year. He is 21 years old. He has seen more of the world than most of his classmates. He has seen the gathering storm, and he has begun to think seriously about what it all means. His grades improve. Not dramatically, but enough to show that he is engaged. He takes a course on government with Professor Arthur Holcomb. He writes papers on international relations, on democracy, on the failures of collective security. His professors notice that Jack Kennedy, for all his casual charm and apparent nonchalance, is a young man with something to say. In March 1939, Hitler breaks the Munich Agreement and seizes the rest of Czechoslovakia. Chamberlain's policy of appeasement lies in ruins. Britain and France guarantee Poland's independence. The lines are being drawn. War is no longer a question of if, but when. Jack returns to Europe in the summer of 1939. He travels extensively, gathering material for what will become his senior thesis. He is in Berlin in August when the Nazi-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact is announced. The German and Russian foreign ministers, enemies just days before, sign a deal to carve up Eastern Europe between them. Poland is doomed. Jack is in London on September 1, 1939, when German tanks roll into Poland. 2 days later, Britain and France declare war on Germany. The Second World War has begun. Jack is in the visitors' gallery of the House of Commons when Chamberlain announces that Britain is at war. The solemnity of the moment, the weight of history, settles over the chamber. Jack takes careful notes. He understands that he is witnessing a turning point, not just in European history, but in world history. The old order is dying. Something new, something terrible, is being born. Joe Kennedy, the ambassador, still believes Britain will lose. He still argues for American neutrality. But Jack is not so sure. He sees the determination of the British people. He sees them preparing to fight, to endure whatever comes. He respects their courage even as he questions their chances of victory. He returns to Harvard in the fall of 1939, determined to make sense of what he has seen, to understand how Europe stumbled into this catastrophe, and to draw lessons that might help America avoid the same fate. His senior thesis examines the question of why Britain was so unprepared for war. He analyzes the political, economic, and psychological factors that led to appeasement. He is critical of Chamberlain and the British government, but he is also sympathetic. He understands the desire to avoid war, the hope that reason could prevail over aggression. His thesis is titled Appeasement at Munich, the inevitable result of the slowness of the British democracy to change from a disarmament policy to a rearmament policy. It is long, nearly 150 pages. It is serious, deeply researched, and thoughtful. His thesis advisor encourages him to consider publishing it. Jack graduates from Harvard in June 1940 with a degree in international relations. He graduates cum laude, a respectable achievement if not a spectacular one. But his thesis stands out. With the help of his father, his connections, and considerable editing by a professional journalist hired by Joe Kennedy, Jack's thesis is published that summer as a book titled Why England Slept. It becomes a bestseller. The timing is perfect. France has just fallen to the Germans. Britain stands alone. America is debating its role in the war. Jack Kennedy, 23 years old, has written a serious analysis of one of the most pressing questions of the day. The reviews are favorable. The book establishes Jack as something more than just another rich man's son. He is an author, a thinker, someone with something to say about the great issues of the age. But even as his book climbs the bestseller lists, Jack faces a more immediate question. What to do with his life? His father's career as ambassador is effectively over. Joe Kennedy's increasingly pessimistic statements about Britain's chances, his continued advocacy for isolationism, have made him a liability. Roosevelt will eventually ask for his resignation. Joe Jr. is in law school at Harvard, preparing for a career in politics. The mantle of family political ambition rests on his shoulders. Jack is free to do something else. But what? For a time, Jack considers graduate school. Stanford, perhaps, or Yale Law School. He spends several months in 1941 auditing business courses at Stanford, but his heart isn't in it. He travels, he writes a little, he dates beautiful women, he enjoys his celebrity as a best-selling author, but there is a restlessness in him, a sense that he should be doing something more, something that matters. And hanging over everything is the war. By 1941, it is clear that America's neutrality cannot last. The Germans control most of Europe. The Battle of Britain has been fought and won by the RAF, but London burns under the Blitz. In the Pacific, Japanese aggression threatens American interests. Roosevelt inches closer to intervention, providing aid to Britain through Lend-Lease, but the American public remains divided. Jack knows that if America enters the war, he will serve. There is never any question about that. The Kennedy family ethos demands it. Service, duty, courage. These are not empty words in the Kennedy household, they are expectations. And despite his health problems, despite his chronic back pain and his various ailments, Jack is determined to do his part. In September 1941, Jack joins the Navy. Getting accepted is not easy. His back problems should disqualify him. But Joe Kennedy's influence opens doors. A friendly doctor signs off on Jack's physical. He is commissioned as an ensign and assigned to the Office of Naval Intelligence in Washington. It is desk work, essentially, preparing briefings, analyzing intelligence reports, important work, but not the kind of service Jack craves. He wants to be where the action is. He wants to command men. He wants, perhaps, to prove something to himself and to his family. Then, on December 7, 1941, everything changes. Japanese aircraft attack the American naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Over 2,000 Americans are killed. The Pacific Fleet is devastated. The next day, President Roosevelt addresses Congress. Yesterday, December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. Congress declares war on Japan. 3 days later, Germany and Italy declare war on the United States. America is fully engaged in the Second World War. Isolationism is dead. The debate is over. Now there is only the fight. Jack Kennedy, like millions of other young American men, is going to war. The Navy sends Jack to the Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron's Training Center in Melville, Rhode Island in the fall of 1942. PT boats, fast attack craft made of plywood and powered by 3 12-cylinder engines, 77 feet long, armed with torpedoes, machine guns, and a crew of 12 to 14 men. They are designed to attack larger ships, to strike fast and disappear into the night. Dangerous work, the kind of work Jack wants. The training is rigorous. Navigation, tactics, gunnery, seamanship. Jack throws himself into it. His back pain is constant, but he doesn't complain. He takes the training seriously because he knows that lives will depend on his competence. His fellow officers notice something about Jack Kennedy. He is personable, easy to get along with, never pulling rank or trading on his famous name. He listens, he learns, and he is brave. Not in the loud, boastful way, but in the quiet determination to do what needs to be done, regardless of the cost. By early 1943, Jack is ready for combat. He is assigned to Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 2 and shipped out to the South Pacific. The Solomon Islands. A chain of tropical islands northeast of Australia where American and Japanese forces are locked in a brutal struggle for control. The Japanese have moved down from their major base at Rabaul, threatening the Allied supply lines to Australia. The Americans are pushing back, island by island, fighting in conditions that are almost unimaginable. Steaming jungles, malaria, dysentery, intense heat, and always the enemy, skilled, determined, willing to fight to the death. Jack arrives at Tulagi in the Solomon Islands in April 1943. He is assigned command of PT-109, a boat that has seen better days. The previous commander had run her aground. She needs work. Jack and his crew get her seaworthy again. They paint her hull. They test her engines. They practice maneuvers. The crew is a mix of enlisted men from all over America. Some are experienced. Some are as green as Jack is. But they bond quickly, the way men do when they know they will face danger together. The PT boat war in the Solomons is unlike anything else in the Navy. These are small boats operating at night in waters controlled by the Japanese. Their mission is to intercept Japanese destroyers and supply vessels running the Tokyo Express down the slot, bringing reinforcements and supplies to Japanese garrisons on the islands. It is cat-and-mouse warfare. Fast, violent, often chaotic. The PT boats are vulnerable. One good hit can tear them apart. Fire is a constant danger because of the high-octane aviation fuel they carry, but they are also effective when handled well. Fast enough to evade enemy fire, armed well enough to cause damage, and crewed by young men brave enough, or perhaps foolish enough, to take them into harm's way. Jack's early patrols are uneventful. Long nights motoring through dark waters watching for Japanese ships that never appear. The tedium of war. The waiting. The fear that gnaws at you when you have too much time to think. Jack reads. He writes letters home. He takes care of his crew. He projects confidence even when he feels anything but confident. This is leadership. Not the abstract kind taught at Harvard, but the real thing. The kind where men look to you to make decisions that will determine whether they live or die. And then comes the night of August 1st, 1943. A night that will define Jack Kennedy for the rest of his life. A night of catastrophe and heroism that will transform a young lieutenant into a legend. PT-109 and 14 other PT boats are ordered to intercept a Japanese convoy moving down the slot. It is a dark night, overcast, no moon. Visibility is poor. The sea is calm. The PT boats spread out, engines idling, waiting for the enemy ships to appear. Around 2 a.m., the Japanese destroyers come. 4 of them, moving fast, cutting through the water at 30 knots. The PT boats attack, firing torpedoes. Chaos erupts. Searchlights sweep the water. Gunfire lights up the night. Most of the torpedoes miss. The destroyers are too fast, too maneuverable. They evade and counterattack, forcing the PT boats to scatter. Jack sees one of the Japanese destroyers, the Amagiri, emerge from the darkness. She is huge, bearing down on PT-109 at high speed. Jack tries to turn the boat to get away, but it is too late. The destroyer slices through PT-109 like a knife through paper, cutting the boat in two. The collision is devastating. 2 of Jack's crew are killed instantly, engulfed in fire as the fuel tanks explode. The rest are thrown into the water. The bow section of PT-109 remains afloat. The stern sinks immediately. Jack finds himself in the water, his back screaming in pain from the impact. Around him, men are calling out in the darkness. He swims to the floating bow section. Some of his crew are already there. Others are scattered in the water, clinging to debris. Jack counts heads. 11 men, including himself, have survived, but they are in enemy waters. The Japanese control these islands. Dawn is hours away, and when the sun rises, they will be exposed, vulnerable, probably dead. Jack makes a decision. They will swim to a nearby island. It is 3 miles away. Some of the men are injured. Patrick McMahon, the engineer, has been badly burned. But staying with the wreckage means capture or death. They have to move. Jack takes the strap of McMahon's life jacket in his teeth and tows him, swimming for hours through the dark water. The other men swim in a group, pushing a plank with the most badly injured man on it. It takes them 5 hours, but they reach the island. A tiny speck of land, perhaps 100 yards across, covered in dense vegetation. No fresh water, no food, but they are alive. They spend the day hidden in the vegetation, watching Japanese planes fly overhead. That night, Jack swims out into Ferguson Passage, hoping to signal any PT boats that might be patrolling. He clings to a piece of timber, floating for hours in the dark water. No boats come. He swims back to the island, exhausted, defeated. The next night he tries again, with another crew member, Barney Ross. Again, nothing. They are on their own. On the 3rd day, Jack makes another decision. There is another island nearby with more vegetation, possibly coconuts and water. They swim again, towing McMahon, pushing their makeshift raft. They reach the island and find coconuts. Not enough to sustain them long term, but something. Jack and Ross swim to yet another island, leaving the rest of the crew behind. On this 3rd island, they find a crate of supplies and a canoe, and then, miraculously, they encounter 2 native islanders, scouts working for the Australian coast watchers who coordinate intelligence and rescue operations in the area. Jack scratches a message on a coconut shell. Noro ISL commander, native knows Posset, he can pilot, 11 alive, need small boat Kennedy. The islanders take the coconut to the coast watcher, Reg Evans. Evans coordinates with the Navy. On the night of August 8th, 7 days after the collision, a PT boat arrives to rescue Jack and his crew. They are emaciated, exhausted, some badly injured. But they are alive, all 11 of them. Jack has saved his crew. The story of PT-1029 spreads quickly. It becomes a legend. The young lieutenant who refused to give up, who towed a wounded man for miles through enemy waters, who kept trying until he found rescue. The press picks up the story. John Hersey, a famous war correspondent, writes a detailed account that is published in The New Yorker and then condensed in Reader's Digest, reaching millions. Suddenly, John F. Kennedy is a war hero. Not just another rich kid in uniform, but a genuine hero. Someone who faced death and didn't flinch. Someone who saved his men through courage and determination. Jack downplays it. "It was involuntary," he says. "They sank my boat." But he wears the hero's mantle nonetheless. It will follow him for the rest of his life, defining him in the public imagination. The young naval officer who survived against impossible odds. The leader who never abandoned his men. The embodiment of courage under fire. But the reality is more complex than the legend. Jack emerges from the experience changed. He has seen death up close. He has felt the weight of command, the knowledge that your decisions determine whether men live or die. He has learned something about himself, about his capacity for endurance, for leadership under the worst possible circumstances. And his body has paid a price. His back is worse than ever. The swim through the dark waters, towing McMahon, has damaged something. He is in constant pain. He will be in pain for the rest of his life. Jack remains in the South Pacific for several more months, commanding other PT boats, running more patrols. But his health is deteriorating. In December 1943, he is sent back to the States. He spends time in hospitals. Doctors operate on his back. It helps, but not much. He is thin, gaunt, suffering from malaria and the lingering effects of his various tropical illnesses. In March 1944, he is assigned to the PT Boat Training Center in Miami. Not combat, but at least he is still serving. By the end of 1944, his health has deteriorated to the point that the Navy can no longer use him. He is honorably discharged in March 1945. The war in Europe is almost over. The war in the Pacific will end in August. Jack Kennedy's war is finished. He returns home to Hyannisport, to his family, to a world that seems both familiar and strange. He is 27 years old, a decorated war veteran, a published author, a hero, but he has no idea what to do with the rest of his life. Politics seems like Joe Jr.'s territory, not his. Jack is more interested in journalism, perhaps, or writing, or teaching. He applies to cover the founding conference of the United Nations in San Francisco for the Hearst newspapers. He is accepted. He goes to San Francisco in the spring of 1945, credentialed as a journalist, covering one of the most important diplomatic gatherings in history. The war is ending. A new world order is being created. Jack watches, listens, takes notes. He is fascinated by the process, by the personalities, by the grand ambitions and the petty squabbles. He writes perceptive articles about the conference, displaying a journalist's eye for detail and a political scientist's understanding of the deeper currents at play. And then, in August 1945, everything changes again. Joe Jr. is dead, killed in action over the English Channel. Joe Jr., the golden son, the one who was supposed to be president, is gone. Joe Kennedy Sr. is devastated. All his ambitions, all his dreams, were wrapped up in his firstborn son. Joe Jr. was supposed to carry the Kennedy name to the White House, and now he is dead, killed when the explosives-laden aircraft he was piloting detonated prematurely. A volunteer mission, a dangerous mission. Joe Jr. didn't have to go, but he went anyway, driven by the same competitive spirit, the same desire to prove himself, that had defined the Kennedy brothers' relationship from childhood. Jack grieves. He and Joe Jr. had been rivals, but they had also been brothers. Closer than most people knew. The competition between them had been real, but so had the affection. Jack writes about Joe Jr., trying to capture something of his brother's spirit, his drive, his complicated legacy. But Jack also understands what his brother's death means for him. The mantle has passed. The expectations that were Joe Jr.'s are now his. Joe Kennedy Sr. makes it clear. Jack will go into politics. Jack will fulfill the family ambition. Jack will become president. It is not a request. It is a command. And Jack, for all his independence of thought, for all his intellectual sophistication, is still his father's son. He will do what is expected of him. The opportunity comes sooner than anyone expects. In early 1946, James Michael Curley, the Democratic congressman representing Massachusetts' 11th District, resigns his seat to become mayor of Boston once again. A special election is called. The 11th District includes Cambridge, home of Harvard, along with the working-class neighborhoods of Charlestown, East Boston, and the North End. Irish, Italian, and Jewish neighborhoods. Immigrant communities. The kind of places where the Kennedy name still means something because of Joe Kennedy's father, and because of Honey Fitz, Jack's grandfather. Joe Kennedy sees the opening. Jack will run for Congress. He is 28 years old. He has no political experience. He is a war hero, yes, but he is also wealthy, Harvard-educated, someone who can seem out of touch with the concerns of ordinary working people. But Joe Kennedy believes in the power of money, organization, and the Kennedy name. He commits his considerable resources to Jack's campaign. Money flows. Organizers are hired. Veterans are recruited to tell the story of PT 109. The Kennedy machine roars to life. Jack is not a natural politician at first. He is shy in crowds. His speaking voice is thin, almost reedy. He speaks too fast, without the dramatic pauses and cadences that make for effective political oratory. He is stiff, formal, more comfortable with ideas than with the messy business of retail politics. But he learns. He goes door to door. He attends neighborhood meetings. He speaks at union halls and veterans clubs and church basements. And slowly, something clicks. The young war hero who talks about housing and jobs and veterans' benefits, who listens, who doesn't talk down to people, who treats everyone with respect regardless of their background or station in life. The Kennedy family mobilizes. His sisters throw house parties, inviting neighborhood women to meet Jack, to ask him questions, to feel like they are part of something. These are brilliant political theater. Hundreds of women show up at hotels and community centers to meet the handsome young war hero. Jack's charm, his self-deprecating humor, his genuine interest in people's concerns wins them over. His mother, Rose, campaigns tirelessly. His grandfather, Honey Fitz, comes out of retirement to sing Sweet Adeline at rallies. The Kennedy name still has magic in Boston. The primary is the real contest. The general election in this solidly Democratic district is a formality. Jack faces 9 opponents in the primary, including several experienced politicians. But he has advantages they don't: money, organization, the Kennedy name, the hero narrative, and something else, a quality that is hard to define but impossible to ignore: charisma. Not the loud, backslapping variety, but something quieter, a sense of intelligence, of thoughtfulness, of potential. People look at Jack Kennedy and see someone special, someone who might go far. On primary day, June 18, 1946, Jack wins decisively. He receives 22,183 votes, nearly twice as many as his nearest competitor. He is the Democratic nominee, which in this district means he has won the seat. In the general election in November, he defeats his Republican opponent by more than 2-1. At 29 years old, John F. Kennedy is going to Congress. Representative Kennedy from Massachusetts. The beginning of a political career that will take him to heights even his ambitious father could not have imagined. Washington in 1947 is a city transformed by war, the capital of the world's most powerful nation, the only country to emerge from the Second World War stronger than it entered. America's economy is booming. Its military is unmatched. Its influence is global. But the world is changing rapidly. The wartime alliance with the Soviet Union is fracturing. Winston Churchill has warned of an iron curtain descending across Europe. Tensions are rising. The Cold War is beginning, though no one calls it that yet. And into this world steps Congressman Kennedy, one of 435 members of the House of Representatives, a freshman legislator with everything to learn. Jack rents a house in Georgetown with his sister, Eunice. Washington society takes notice of the young congressman. Handsome, rich, single, a war hero. He is invited to parties. He dates actresses and socialites. He is charming, fun, quick-witted. But he is also serious about his work. He serves on the House Education and Labor Committee. He studies the issues: housing, education, labor relations, the challenges facing veterans returning from the war. He is not a natural legislator. The backroom dealing, the log rolling, the endless compromises required to pass legislation, these do not come naturally to him. But he learns. He watches. He builds relationships. He works hard, even as his health continues to plague him. The back pain, the mysterious illnesses. He is often sick, but he rarely complains. He simply pushes through. Congressman Kennedy develops a reputation as a thoughtful, independent voice. He doesn't toe the party line automatically. He thinks for himself. He supports labor unions but opposes the more radical elements of the labor movement. He is skeptical of communism, increasingly so as the Soviet threat becomes clearer. In 1947, the Truman Doctrine is announced, committing America to containing communist expansion. The Marshall Plan provides billions in aid to rebuild war-torn Europe. The world is being remade, and America is at the center of it. Jack Kennedy pays attention. He travels. He visits Europe and sees the devastation firsthand. He goes to Ireland and meets distant relatives. He goes to England and observes the post-war transformation of Britain under the Labour government. He is forming a worldview shaped by his experiences in the war, his education, his reading, and his observations. But Congress, he realizes, is not enough. The House of Representatives is too large, too unwieldy, too limited in its influence. Real power, real impact comes from the Senate, or the governorship, or something higher still. Jack serves 3 terms in the House, from 1947 to 1953. He is re-elected easily in 1948 and 1950. He is popular in his district. He delivers for his constituents. He is visible, accessible, hard-working, but he is restless. The House feels like a waiting room. He wants more. In 1952, the opportunity presents itself. Henry Cabot Lodge, Jr., the Republican senator from Massachusetts, is up for re-election. Lodge is formidable. He comes from one of the most distinguished families in Massachusetts history. His grandfather, Henry Cabot Lodge, Sr., was a powerful senator who led the fight against the League of Nations. Lodge, Jr. is polished, experienced, well-connected. He is also close to Dwight Eisenhower, the war hero who is running for president as a Republican. Eisenhower is immensely popular, he will almost certainly win, and his coattails will help Republicans across the country, including Lodge. Everyone tells Jack that challenging Lodge is suicide. The odds are impossible. Eisenhower will crush the Democratic presidential nominee, Illinois Governor Adlai Stevenson. The Republican wave will sweep Lodge back into office. But Joe Kennedy sees it differently. Lodge is vulnerable. He has been in Washington for years, growing distant from Massachusetts voters. He is taking his re-election for granted. And the Kennedy machine, refined over 3 House campaigns, is ready for a bigger fight. Joe Kennedy commits everything to this race: money, organization, the full force of the family. This is not just another congressional campaign. This is the big leagues. This is Jack's chance to become a national figure. The campaign begins in earnest in early 1952. Jack crisscrosses Massachusetts, every town, every city, every neighborhood. The House parties that worked so well in 1946 are deployed statewide. 33 House parties in one night alone, with Jack rushing from one to another, shaking hands, answering questions, making connections. His sisters are everywhere. His mother campaigns with a ferocity that surprises even those who know her. Bobby Kennedy, now 26 years old, becomes the campaign manager. Bobby is different from Jack. More intense, more ruthless, less charming, but more driven. He runs the campaign like a military operation. No detail is too small. No opportunity is wasted. No slight is forgotten. Jack's health is worse than ever during the campaign. His back pain is excruciating. He uses crutches sometimes, though never in public. He takes cortisone for what has finally been diagnosed as Addison's disease, a potentially fatal adrenal gland disorder. He is often exhausted, in constant pain, suffering from infections and other complications. But he never stops. He campaigns through it all, projecting energy and vitality even when he feels neither. This is the Kennedy way. You don't show weakness, you don't quit, you win. The campaign focuses on Jack's war record, his youth, his energy, and his promise of new leadership. Lodge is painted as old guard, out of touch, more interested in international affairs than in the problems of ordinary Massachusetts citizens. It is not entirely fair. Lodge is a capable senator. But politics is not about fairness. It is about winning, and the Kennedys are determined to win. There is another element to the campaign, though it is not discussed openly. Religion. Jack is Catholic. No Catholic has ever been elected president. There are still deep prejudices in America against Catholics, particularly in positions of national power. But in Massachusetts, being Catholic is an advantage. The state is heavily Catholic. filled with Irish, Italian, and Polish immigrants and their descendants. Jack's Catholicism connects him to these voters in a way that the Protestant Brahmin Lodge cannot match. The Kennedy campaign uses this subtly but effectively. Jack attends masses, he speaks at Catholic schools and organizations. He is one of them, one of their own, a Catholic boy who made good, who could go all the way. The issue that complicates everything is communism. It is 1952, the height of the McCarthy era. Senator Joseph McCarthy of Wisconsin has made himself famous or infamous by claiming that communists have infiltrated the highest levels of American government. His accusations are often baseless, his methods reckless, but he has tapped into real anxieties about the Soviet threat and the spread of communism. Many politicians are terrified of McCarthy. To oppose him is to risk being labeled soft on communism, or worse, a communist sympathizer. Jack Kennedy walks a careful line. He does not embrace McCarthy, but he does not condemn him either. This is partly strategic. McCarthy is popular with many Catholic voters in Massachusetts. He is also a friend of the Kennedy family. Joe Kennedy admires McCarthy. Bobby Kennedy has worked for McCarthy's investigative subcommittee. To attack McCarthy would be politically risky and personally awkward, so Jack says little, focusing his campaign on other issues. As Election Day approaches, the polls show a close race. Eisenhower is going to win the presidency in a landslide, as everyone predicted. But in Massachusetts, something unexpected is happening. Jack Kennedy is holding his own against Lodge. The House parties have worked. The grassroots organizing has worked. The Kennedy charm offensive has worked. On election night, November 4th, 1952, the results come in. Eisenhower wins Massachusetts by more than 200,000 votes, but Jack Kennedy defeats Henry Cabot Lodge by just over 70,000 votes. He has bucked the national trend. He has beaten a powerful incumbent in a Republican year. He is going to the United States Senate. He is 35 years old. And suddenly, people across the country are asking, who is this young senator from Massachusetts? The Senate is different from the House, smaller, more collegial, more influential. Only 100 members. Each one is important. Each one has power. Senators serve 6-year terms, giving them freedom to think long-term, to take risks that House members facing re-election every 2 years cannot afford. Jack Kennedy enters the Senate in January 1953 as part of a freshman class that includes Lyndon Johnson of Texas, who is already a force to be reckoned with, and Mike Mansfield of Montana. But Jack stands out. The victory over Lodge has made him a national figure. He is young, handsome, a war hero. The press is fascinated by him. Life magazine runs a feature calling him the most eligible bachelor in Washington. But Jack knows that celebrity is not the same as substance. He needs to prove himself as a serious legislator, someone with ideas and the ability to get things done. He is assigned to the Senate Labor and Public Welfare Committee and the Government Operations Committee. Not the most prestigious assignments, but opportunities nonetheless. He hires a talented staff. His most important hire is Theodore Sorensen, a young lawyer from Nebraska with a gift for writing and a sharp political mind. Sorensen becomes Jack's alter ego, his speechwriter, his policy advisor, his intellectual partner. The two men develop a working relationship that will last for the rest of Jack's life. Sorensen understands Jack's voice, his way of thinking, his instincts. He can translate Jack's ideas into eloquent prose. Together, they will craft some of the most memorable speeches in American history. But first, Jack faces a personal crisis. His back has deteriorated to the point where he can barely walk. The pain is constant, overwhelming. Doctors tell him he needs surgery, a dangerous double fusion of his lumbar spine. The surgery carries enormous risks, particularly for someone with Addison's disease. His immune system is compromised. The risk of infection is high. The risk of death is real. But the alternative is a life of increasing disability and constant agony. Jack decides to have the surgery. In October 1954, he is wheeled into the operating room at the Hospital for Special Surgery in New York. His family gathers, fearing the worst. Joe Kennedy is told that his son has a 50-50 chance of surviving. The surgery takes hours. Complications develop. Jack nearly dies. He receives last rites from a Catholic priest. But he survives. Barely. The recovery is long and agonizing. Months in bed. A second surgery in February 1955 to remove a metal plate that has become infected. More months of recovery. Jack is frustrated, depressed, in constant pain. But he uses the time. He reads, he thinks, and he writes. With Sorensen's help, he begins work on a book about political courage, about senators throughout American history who took principled stands even when it cost them politically. The book is called Profiles in Courage. It examines 8 senators, from John Quincy Adams to Robert Taft, who defied party, public opinion, or political expediency to do what they believed was right. The book is partly history, partly philosophy, and partly autobiography. Jack is thinking about what it means to be a leader, what courage looks like in political life, how to balance principle and pragmatism. The book is published in January 1956. It becomes a bestseller. It wins the Pulitzer Prize for Biography in 1957. Once again, Jack Kennedy has demonstrated that he is more than a pretty face or a famous name. He is a serious thinker, a gifted writer, a man of substance. But there is another dimension to Jack's life in the mid-1950s, one that is equally important to his story. On May 8, 1952, at a dinner party in Georgetown, Jack meets Jacqueline Lee Bouvier. She is 12 years younger than Jack, 22 years old, beautiful, sophisticated, cultured. She comes from a prominent but troubled family. Her father, John Vernou Bouvier III, known as Black Jack, is a charming but dissolute stockbroker. Her mother divorced him and remarried Hugh Auchincloss, a wealthy Washington socialite. Jackie grew up between two worlds, the bohemian glamour of her father, its life in New York, and the established wealth of her stepfather, his estates in Virginia and Rhode Island. She attended Vassar and the Sorbonne. She speaks French fluently. She loves art, literature, history, horses. She is working as the inquiring camera girl for the Washington Times-Herald, a job that involves photographing people around Washington and asking them questions for a daily column. Jack is immediately interested. Jackie is different from the actresses and socialites he usually dates. She is intelligent, well-read, challenging. She doesn't fawn over him. She has her own opinions, her own interests, her own life. She is also beautiful in a way that is different from conventional Hollywood beauty. Dark hair, wide-set eyes, a smile that is simultaneously warm and enigmatic, an air of mystery and sophistication. Jack pursues her, but not too aggressively. He is still the bachelor senator, still playing the field. But there is something about Jackie that keeps drawing him back. They date on and off through 1952 and early 1953. Jackie is wary. She knows Jack's reputation. She knows he is not the faithful type. She is also unsure about marrying a politician. She has seen what political life does to families. The constant scrutiny, the lack of privacy, the demands and compromises. She loves her independence. She loves her work. She is not sure she wants to give it up to become a political wife. But Jack is persuasive, and she is falling in love, despite her reservations. In June 1953, Jack proposes. They are at the Auchincloss estate, Hammersmith Farm in Newport, Rhode Island. Jackie says yes. The wedding is planned for September 12, 1953, at St. Mary's Church in Newport. It is one of the social events of the year. Nearly 800 guests attend the ceremony. Another 1,200 come to the reception at Hammersmith Farm. The press covers it extensively, the young senator and the beautiful socialite. It is a fairy tale wedding, at least in appearance. Jack is 36. Jackie is 24. They are one of the most glamorous couples in America. But the reality of the marriage is more complicated than the fairy tale suggests. Jack does not give up his philandering. He is constitutionally incapable of fidelity. Jackie knows this, or comes to know it quickly. It causes her pain, but she accepts it as part of the bargain. She has married a man who is going places, a man who may one day be president. She will be by his side, presenting the image of the perfect political wife, even as she maintains a certain emotional distance, a protective shell around her inner life. She focuses on creating beautiful homes, on her interests in art and culture, on raising the children they will have. She plays the role required of her with grace and style, but she is nobody's fool. She understands the game and plays it on her own terms. The marriage transforms Jack's image. The bachelor senator becomes a family man. In 1956, Jackie suffers a stillbirth, a daughter they would have named Arabella. It is a devastating loss. Jack is not there when it happens. He is on a yachting vacation in the Mediterranean. Bobby has to track him down and convince him to come home. This episode reveals something about Jack's emotional limitations, his difficulty with intimacy, his tendency to compartmentalize his life. But it also deepens Jackie's understanding of what she has gotten herself into. She nearly leaves him, but she stays. Perhaps because she loves him despite everything. Perhaps because she is committed to the life they are building together. Perhaps because she understands that leaving would mean giving up the extraordinary opportunity to be part of history. By late 1956, Jack Kennedy is thinking seriously about national office. Not the presidency yet, but the vice presidency. Adlai Stevenson is the Democratic nominee for president again, facing Eisenhower again in what everyone knows will be another losing effort. But the vice presidential nomination is open. Stevenson has decided to let the convention choose his running mate. It is an unusual move, and it creates an opportunity. Jack sees it. So does Bobby, who is now his brother's closest political advisor. They decide to go for it. Jack is young, yes, but he has proven himself. He has won a tough Senate race. He has written 2 best-selling books. He is Catholic, which could help the ticket in key states. He is telegenic, a new consideration in the age of television. He could balance Stevenson's cerebral, somewhat stiff persona with youth and vigor. The Democratic Convention in Chicago in August 1956 is Jack Kennedy's coming-out party on the national stage. He gives the nominating speech for Stevenson, a polished, eloquent address that showcases his speaking ability. Then the fight for the vice presidential nomination begins. It is chaotic, dramatic, conducted in front of television cameras broadcasting to millions. Jack's main opponent is Senator Estes Kefauver of Tennessee. Other names are put forward. The balloting is close. At one point, Jack is ahead. He comes tantalizingly close to winning. But in the end, Kefauver pulls ahead and secures the nomination. Jack loses. He is disappointed. But in losing, he has won something more valuable. He has introduced himself to the nation. Millions of Americans have watched him on their television screens. They have seen a young, attractive, articulate senator who looks like the future. They remember him. And when Stevenson and Kefauver lose badly to Eisenhower in November, Jack realizes that losing the vice presidential nomination was a blessing. He has avoided being associated with a crushing defeat. He is free to chart his own course. And that course increasingly points toward 1960. The years between 1956 and 1960 are Jack Kennedy's preparation for the presidency. Everything he does is calculated, consciously or not, to position himself for a run at the White House. He travels constantly, not just around Massachusetts, but around the country. He speaks at Democratic dinners and fundraisers. He campaigns for other Democratic candidates in the 1958 midterm elections. He builds relationships. He collects chits. He lets it be known, subtly at first, then more openly, that he is interested, that he is running. In November 1957, Jackie gives birth to their first child, Caroline Bouvier Kennedy, a healthy baby girl. Jack is overjoyed. Fatherhood softens something in him, though he is still an absent father by modern standards, often away campaigning or working. But Caroline's birth completes the picture. The young senator, the beautiful wife, the adorable daughter, the American dream. The Kennedys are becoming America's family, glamorous and attractive in a way that politicians rarely are. Jack is also building his political operation. Bobby is the manager, the enforcer, the person who makes the hard decisions and delivers the bad news. Brother Teddy, the youngest Kennedy, is learning the ropes. The family network extends across the country. Friends from Choate, from Harvard, from the Navy, from Congress, Joe Kennedy's business associates, old political hands from Massachusetts, new talent recruited from universities and law firms. It is a formidable machine, more sophisticated than anything seen before in American politics. They are thinking nationally from the beginning. They are planning for every contingency. They are prepared to fight hard and to fight smart. But Jack faces serious obstacles. First, his religion. No Catholic has ever been elected president. When Al Smith, the Catholic governor of New York, ran in 1928, he was crushed, partly because of widespread anti-Catholic prejudice. That prejudice has not disappeared. Many Americans, particularly Protestants in the South and Midwest, believe that a Catholic president would take orders from the Pope, that he would be loyal to Rome rather than to the Constitution. It is bigotry, plain and simple, but it is real and it is powerful. Jack will have to confront it directly if he wants to win. Second, his age. If elected in 1960, Jack would be 43 years old, the youngest elected president in American history. Many voters wonder if he has enough experience, enough gravitas, to handle the responsibilities of the office. He is a first-term senator. He has no executive experience. He has not been tested in the highest levels of leadership. His youth is both an asset and a liability. It makes him exciting and different, but it also makes him seem untested. Third, his health. The public does not know the full extent of Jack's medical problems. They do not know about the Addison's disease, the chronic back pain, the constant medications, the fragility of his health. If this information became public, it could destroy his candidacy. People would question whether he is physically capable of serving as president. The Kennedy team guards this secret fiercely. They lie about it when asked directly. They present Jack as vigorous and healthy, the picture of youthful vitality. The reality is very different, but the image is what matters. Jack's strategy for 1960 is to enter and win the Democratic primaries. The primary system in 1960 is not what it will become. Only a handful of states hold primaries. Most delegates to the convention are chosen by party bosses and state organizations. But the primaries that do exist are important because they are the only way for Jack to prove that he can win, that his religion is not disqualifying, that voters will support him. He has to win in Protestant states to show that a Catholic can be elected. He has to run up big margins to demonstrate that he has popular support. He has to be perfect. Almost. Jack formally announces his candidacy on January 2, 1960, in the Senate caucus room. He is surrounded by family, Bobby, Teddy, his sisters, Jackie, visibly pregnant with their second child. Joe Kennedy is not there deliberately. Joe's controversial views and business dealings could be a liability. He will work behind the scenes providing money and strategic advice, but he will stay out of the spotlight. Jack's announcement speech is serious and substantive. He talks about the challenges facing America, the Cold War, the Soviet Union, the need for strong leadership in a dangerous world. He does not talk about his religion, not yet. That fight will come later. The first test is the Wisconsin primary in April. Jack's main opponent is Senator Hubert Humphrey of Minnesota. Humphrey is a liberal icon, a passionate advocate for civil rights and social programs. He is also from a neighboring state which gives him a natural advantage in Wisconsin. But Humphrey lacks money. He lacks organization. He is running a shoestring campaign while Jack has unlimited resources and the Kennedy machine. Jack campaigns relentlessly in Wisconsin. He shakes hands at factory gates. He eats cheese with dairy farmers. He appears on local television. His family floods the state. His sisters go door to door. His mother speaks at women's groups. Jackie, despite her pregnancy, campaigns alongside him, her poise and elegance providing a perfect contrast to Jack's energy and youth. Jack wins Wisconsin decisively, but not decisively enough. He carries the Catholic areas but loses the Protestant areas. The result raises questions rather than answering them. Can a Catholic win in a heavily Protestant state? That question will be answered in West Virginia. The West Virginia primary in May 1960 becomes the crucial test. West Virginia is 95% Protestant, poor, economically depressed, culturally conservative. If Jack can win there, he can win anywhere. Humphrey sees it as his last chance. He campaigns on economic issues, on his record as a fighter for working people. But Jack has advantages. Money, lots of it. His father's money, spent freely to build an organization and get the vote out. The Kennedy celebrity. Voters want to see Jack and Jackie, want to touch them, want to be part of the excitement surrounding them. And Jack confronts the religion issue head-on. He does not run from it. He talks about it openly. In a televised speech, Jack addresses a gathering of Protestant ministers in Charleston. He talks about his service in the war. He talks about his brother Joe, who died fighting for his country. He asks whether his brother died in vain, whether the America they fought for is a country where religion determines who can hold office. It is powerful, emotional, effective. He frames the issue as one of American values: tolerance, equality, the separation of church and state. He quotes the First Amendment. He promises that if elected president, he will not take orders from anyone but the American people and the Constitution. It is one of the best speeches of his life, and it changes the conversation. On primary day, May 10, 1960, Jack wins West Virginia by a margin of 60 to 40%. It is a stunning victory. He has proven that a Catholic can win in Protestant America. Humphrey withdraws from the race that night. The path to the nomination is now clear. Other candidates remain. Lyndon Johnson, the powerful Senate Majority Leader, is running, though he has not entered any primaries. Adlai Stevenson still has supporters who hope he will run again. Stuart Symington of Missouri is a dark horse, but Jack has the momentum. He has won where it matters. He goes into the Democratic Convention in Los Angeles in July 1960 as the clear front-runner. The convention is held at the Los Angeles Memorial Sports Arena. It is July, hot and tense. The Kennedy operation has been working the delegates for months. Bobby has been ruthless, counting votes, making promises, applying pressure, but it is not locked up. Johnson and his supporters are fighting hard. Stevenson's supporters stage demonstrations, hoping to create a groundswell for a third nomination. But on the first ballot, Jack Kennedy wins. He secures 806 votes, just over the 761 needed for the nomination. At 43 years old, John Fitzgerald Kennedy is the Democratic nominee for President of the United States. Now comes the hardest decision of the campaign. Who will be his running mate? Bobby and many in the Kennedy inner circle want someone who will not threaten Jack, who will be loyal, who will help in a specific region. But Jack makes a bold, controversial choice. He asks Lyndon Johnson to be his vice president. Johnson is shocked. Most observers are shocked. The two men are not friends. They come from different worlds. Jack is urbane, intellectual, cool. Johnson is earthy, emotional, a master of legislative arm-twisting. But Jack understands something that others miss. He needs to carry the South to win. Johnson can deliver Texas and possibly other southern states. Without Johnson, Jack's path to victory is much narrower. Johnson, after agonizing over the decision, accepts. The ticket is set. Kennedy and Johnson, the New England aristocrat and the Texas populist. an odd couple, but a formidable team. Jack's acceptance speech at the convention introduces a theme that will define his campaign and his presidency. He speaks of a new frontier. "We stand today on the edge of a new frontier," he says, "the frontier of the 1960s, a frontier of unknown opportunities and perils, a frontier of unfulfilled hopes and threats." He talks about challenges in space, in science, in civil rights, in foreign policy. He calls for sacrifice, for service, for a new generation of leadership. It is stirring, visionary, ambitious. It captures something that many Americans are feeling as the complacent 1950s give way to a new, uncertain decade. The world is changing. The old certainties are crumbling. America needs new ideas, new energy, new leadership. Jack Kennedy is offering himself as the embodiment of that new leadership. But he still has to win the election, and his opponent is formidable. Vice President Richard Nixon, Eisenhower's number 2 for 8 years. Nixon has more experience. He is 47 years old, 4 years older than Jack. He has served as vice president during a time of peace and prosperity. He is knowledgeable about foreign policy, having traveled extensively and met with world leaders. He is a skilled debater and a tough campaigner. He has already run one national campaign as Eisenhower's running mate in 1952 and 1956. He knows how to win, and he is determined to step out of Eisenhower's shadow and claim the presidency for himself. The campaign is grueling. Jack crisscrosses the country, speaking at rallies, meeting with local politicians, pressing the flesh. He campaigns in big cities and small towns, in union halls and veterans organizations, in black churches and rural farm communities. He is tireless, or appears to be. In reality, he is often exhausted, in pain, propped up by medications and sheer willpower. But he never lets it show. The image is everything: youth, vigor, energy, the future. The campaign turns on 4 televised debates, the first in American history. On September 26, 1960, 70 million Americans tune in to watch Jack Kennedy and Richard Nixon face off on live television. It is a pivotal moment. Nixon arrives looking haggard. He has been hospitalized with a knee infection earlier in the campaign. He has lost weight. He is pale. He refuses makeup, thinking it will make him look weak. Under the hot studio lights, he sweats. His 5 o'clock shadow makes him look sinister. He is uncomfortable, tense. Jack, by contrast, has prepared meticulously. He has rested in the days before the debate. He has a tan from campaigning in California. He wears makeup. He is calm, confident, presidential. When the debate begins, the contrast is stark. Nixon looks like a man under pressure. Jack looks like a leader. The substance of the debate is less important than the optics. People who listen on radio think Nixon won. People who watch on television overwhelmingly think Jack won. And in 1960, television is what matters. The medium is the message, and the message is clear. Jack Kennedy looks like the future. Nixon looks like the past. There are 3 more debates, but none has the impact of the first. Jack has seized the momentum, but the race remains close. Nixon fights back. Eisenhower, initially reluctant to campaign for his vice president, finally throws his considerable weight behind Nixon. The civil rights issue complicates things. The South is in flux, with many white voters angry about the Democratic Party's growing support for desegregation. Jack has to balance his need for Northern black votes with his need to hold the South. It is a tightrope walk. When Martin Luther King Jr. is arrested in Georgia and sentenced to 4 months hard labor for a traffic violation, Jack calls King's wife, Coretta, to express sympathy. Bobby calls the judge and helps secure King's release. It is good politics and the right thing to do. Black voters notice. But it also costs Jack support among Southern whites. As Election Day approaches, the polls show a dead heat. Too close to call. Everything will depend on turnout. on which side can get its voters to the polls. The Kennedy machine goes into overdrive. In Chicago, Mayor Richard Daley delivers the Democratic vote. In Texas, Lyndon Johnson works his magic. In Appalachia and the industrial Midwest, labor unions mobilize. The Kennedy family is everywhere. Jackie, who has given birth to John Jr. just 2 weeks after the election would have been held had she not been late, campaigns as much as she can. The sisters make final appeals. Bobby coordinates everything with military precision. Joe Kennedy, behind the scenes, makes calls, spends money, does whatever is necessary. On November 8, 1960, America votes. Jack and Jackie cast their ballots in Boston, then return to Hyannisport to wait. The Kennedy compound becomes the center of the political universe. Family, friends, staff, reporters, all gathered to watch the returns. The numbers come in slowly. Early results show Nixon ahead. Then Jack pulls ahead. Then Nixon comes back. It goes back and forth all night. Jack goes to bed around 3 a.m. without knowing the result. He wakes the next morning to find that he has won. Barely. It is one of the closest elections in American history. Jack receives 34,220,984 votes. Nixon receives 34,108,157 votes, a margin of just 112,827 votes out of nearly 69 million cast, less than 0.2%. In the Electoral College, Jack wins 303 to 219, a more comfortable margin, but still close by historical standards. There are immediate allegations of fraud, particularly in Illinois and Texas. Mayor Daley's machine in Chicago is notorious for delivering questionable votes. Johnson's organization in Texas has its own history of creative vote counting. Nixon considers challenging the results but ultimately decides against it. He does not want to put the country through a prolonged constitutional crisis. He concedes. Jack Kennedy is the president-elect of the United States. At 43, he will be the youngest person ever elected to the presidency. He is also the first Catholic president. He has shattered a barrier that many thought would never be broken. He has proven that in America, anyone can rise to the highest office, regardless of their religion or their background. On a cold January morning in 1961, John Fitzgerald Kennedy will place his hand on a Bible and take the oath of office. He will become the 35th President of the United States. The boy, born in Brookline, the sick child who lived in his brother's shadow, the young man who nearly died in the South Pacific, the congressman and senator who defied the odds. He stands now at the pinnacle of power, ready to lead America into a new decade, a new era. The journey from that modest gray house on Beale Street to the White House has been improbable, dramatic, and inspiring. But it is just the beginning. The real test lies ahead. The challenges of governing, the crises that will define his presidency, the legacy that will outlive him. That story is still to come. But on this day, in this moment, with the world watching, John F. Kennedy has achieved what his father dreamed, what his brother was meant to do, what he himself barely dared to imagine. He has won. January the 20th, 1961. Washington, D.C. The sky is bright and cold, the temperature barely above 20 degrees. Snow fell the night before, 8 inches blanketing the Capitol, but the city has been cleared. Pennsylvania Avenue gleams in the winter sun. The Capitol stands white and magnificent against the blue sky. History is about to be made. John Fitzgerald Kennedy stands on the east portico of the Capitol, his hand raised, his breath visible in the frigid air. He wears no overcoat, no hat, projecting youth and vigor despite the bitter cold. Chief Justice Earl Warren administers the oath of office. Jackie stands beside her husband, radiant in a pillbox hat and wool coat, holding the family Bible. Behind them, Richard Nixon watches, gracious in defeat. Dwight Eisenhower, about to become a former president, sits nearby. The crowd stretches as far as the eye can see, thousands upon thousands gathered to witness this moment. The changing of the guard, the passing of the torch. Kennedy's inaugural address is brief, Just 14 minutes, but it will echo through history. His voice is crisp, his Boston accent unmistakable. He speaks not just to Americans, but to the world. He acknowledges that a new generation has come to power, born in this century, tempered by war, disciplined by a hard and bitter peace, proud of its ancient heritage. He speaks of freedom, of human rights, of America's commitment to defending liberty around the globe. He warns adversaries that America will pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe to assure the survival and success of liberty. But it is the ending that people will remember. Kennedy speaks directly to his fellow citizens. He tells them that the rights of man come not from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God. And then the words that will define his presidency. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. It is a challenge, a call to service, a demand that Americans rise above narrow self-interest and contribute to something larger than themselves. The crowd erupts in applause. The moment crystallizes everything Kennedy represents: youth, hope, possibility, the sense that America can be better, can do more, can achieve the impossible if its citizens are willing to try. The new president faces a world in crisis. The Cold War dominates everything. The Soviet Union, under Premier Nikita Khrushchev, is aggressive and expansionist. Soviet Premier claims that communism will bury capitalism, that history is on their side. The Soviets have launched Sputnik, beating America into space. They are building missiles, expanding their nuclear arsenal, supporting revolutionary movements around the world. In Cuba, just 90 miles from Florida, Fidel Castro has established a communist dictatorship allied with Moscow. In Southeast Asia, communist insurgencies threaten American allies. In Berlin, the city remains divided, a flashpoint where East and West confront each other directly. The world feels dangerous, unstable, poised on the edge of catastrophic war. Kennedy assembles a team of advisors he calls the best and the brightest. Robert McNamara, the brilliant Ford Motor Company executive, becomes Secretary of Defense. Dean Rusk, a career diplomat, becomes Secretary of State. McGeorge Bundy, a Harvard dean, becomes National Security Advisor. These are men of intellect and accomplishment, confident that American power and American ingenuity can solve any problem. They bring an energy and activism to government that stands in stark contrast to the more cautious Eisenhower years. They are going to get things done. They are going to win the Cold War. They are going to prove that democracy is superior to communism. But Kennedy's first major foreign policy decision is a disaster. He inherits from Eisenhower a CIA plan to overthrow Castro using Cuban exiles trained and equipped by the United States. The plan calls for an invasion at the Bay of Pigs on Cuba's southern coast. The exiles will establish a beachhead, and the Cuban people oppressed by Castro will rise up to support them. Or so the theory goes. Kennedy is skeptical, but his advisors assure him the plan will work. He approves it with modifications. He insists that American involvement must remain hidden. No American troops, no overt American air support. The exiles will have to do it themselves. On April 17, 1961, less than 3 months into his presidency, the invasion begins. It is a catastrophe. Castro knows about it in advance. His forces are waiting. The exiles are pinned down on the beach. They call for air support. Kennedy refuses, unwilling to reveal American involvement. The invasion collapses within days. More than 100 exiles are killed. Nearly 1,200 are captured. Castro parades them before cameras, humiliating the United States. Kennedy takes full responsibility. He tells the press that victory has 100 fathers, but defeat is an orphan. He admits the error was his. Privately, he is furious. Furious at the CIA for misleading him. Furious at himself for approving the plan. He has learned a brutal lesson about the limits of American power and the dangers of listening to experts who promise easy victories. The Bay of Pigs emboldens Khrushchev. The Soviet leader thinks Kennedy is weak, inexperienced, someone who can be bullied. In June 1961, Kennedy meets Khrushchev at a summit in Vienna. It is a disaster. Khrushchev lectures Kennedy on the inevitability of communist victory. He threatens to sign a peace treaty with East Germany that would end Western access to Berlin. Kennedy pushes back, but Khrushchev is unmoved. The summit ends with both men angry and frustrated. Kennedy tells a reporter afterward that it was the roughest thing he has ever experienced. Khrushchev returns to Moscow convinced that Kennedy will not stand firm. He is about to find out how wrong he is. In August 1961, the Soviets and East Germans build a wall dividing Berlin. Overnight, literally overnight, a barrier of concrete and barbed wire rises through the heart of the city. The Berlin Wall. Families are separated. Friends cannot see each other. East Germans who try to cross are shot. It is a brutal symbol of communist oppression, a prison wall designed to keep people in rather than keep invaders out. Kennedy is outraged, but he does not overreact. The wall is terrible, but at least it stabilizes the situation. Khrushchev has backed away from his threat to cut off Western access to Berlin. The crisis eases, though the wall remains, a scar across the city and across the Cold War landscape. At home, Kennedy launches his domestic agenda, the New Frontier. He proposes federal aid to education, medical care for the elderly, urban renewal, assistance to depressed areas. He wants to revitalize America, to invest in its people and infrastructure. But Congress is resistant. Southern Democrats, conservative on social issues, form an alliance with Republicans to block much of Kennedy's program. The president is frustrated. He is better at foreign policy than domestic politics. He has not mastered the legislative art of building coalitions and counting votes. Lyndon Johnson, as vice president, could help, but Kennedy has sidelined Johnson, giving him little real responsibility. It is a mistake. Johnson knows how to work Congress. Kennedy does not. But Kennedy has one domestic achievement that captures the public imagination. On May 25, 1961, in a special address to Congress, Kennedy issues a challenge. America will land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth before the decade is out. It is an audacious goal. The Soviets are ahead in the space race. They have put the first satellite in orbit, the first man in space. America is playing catch-up. But Kennedy understands the symbolic importance of space exploration. It is about technology and prestige and proving that democracy can achieve what communism cannot. Congress approves funding for the Apollo program. NASA begins the work that will culminate 8 years later in one of humanity's greatest achievements. Kennedy will not live to see it, but the moon landing is his vision, his challenge, his gift to the future. Civil rights becomes the most urgent domestic issue of Kennedy's presidency. The movement is gaining momentum. Black Americans are demanding equality, demanding the rights promised by the Constitution but denied for centuries. Freedom riders travel through the South, challenging segregation in interstate transportation. They are beaten by mobs while local police stand by. In Birmingham, Alabama, police unleash dogs and fire hoses on peaceful protesters. Images of violence against nonviolent demonstrators shock the nation and the world. Martin Luther King Jr. writes from a Birmingham jail, eloquently explaining why Black Americans can no longer wait for freedom. The moral pressure on Kennedy intensifies. Kennedy's record on civil rights is complicated. He understands intellectually that segregation is wrong, that Black Americans deserve equality. But he is also a politician calculating the costs. He needs Southern support in Congress. He needs to win the South in 1964 to secure re-election. He moves slowly, cautiously, trying to manage the crisis rather than lead boldly. He sends federal marshals to protect the Freedom Riders, but only after violence erupts. He appoints Black Americans to government positions, but he does not push hard for civil rights legislation. Robert Kennedy, the Attorney General, is more aggressive, using the Justice Department to support desegregation. But the president himself hesitates. The turning point comes in June 1963. Governor George Wallace of Alabama stands in the doorway of the University of Alabama, physically blocking 2 black students from registering. It is theater, a symbolic stand for segregation. Federal authorities force Wallace to step aside, and the students enroll. That night, Kennedy addresses the nation on television. For the first time, he speaks about civil rights as a moral issue, not just a legal or political one. He says that America will not be fully free until all its citizens are free. He announces that he will send comprehensive civil rights legislation to Congress. It is a pivotal moment. Kennedy has finally chosen a side. The speech angers Southern whites and delights civil rights activists. Kennedy knows the political cost will be high, but he has made his decision. Some things are more important than politics. October 1962. The world comes closer to nuclear war than at any time before or since. It begins with reconnaissance photographs taken by an American U-2 spy plane flying over Cuba. The photos show Soviet missiles being installed on the island. Medium-range ballistic missiles capable of reaching American cities within minutes. Missiles that could kill tens of millions of Americans. The Soviets have lied. Khrushchev personally assured Kennedy that the Soviets would not place offensive weapons in Cuba. But there they are in the photographs, undeniable. Kennedy convenes a secret group of advisors, the Executive Committee of the National Security Council, known as XCOM. For 13 days, they debate how to respond. Some, including several military leaders, urge immediate airstrikes to destroy the missile sites, followed by an invasion of Cuba. Others argue for diplomacy, for trying to negotiate a solution. Kennedy listens to all perspectives. He has learned from the Bay of Pigs to question assumptions, to push back against consensus, to think through consequences. He knows that any military action against Cuba could trigger a Soviet response, possibly in Berlin, possibly with nuclear weapons. The stakes could not be higher. One wrong decision and the world ends. Kennedy chooses a middle course, a naval blockade of Cuba. He calls it a quarantine to avoid the legal implications of the word blockade, which is an act of war. American ships will surround Cuba and prevent Soviet vessels from delivering more missiles. It is a strong response, but not an act of war. It gives Khrushchev time to back down without losing face. On October 22, Kennedy addresses the nation. He reveals the missiles, he announces the quarantine, he demands that the Soviets remove the missiles. His voice is steady, grave, presidential. Americans are terrified. Many stock up on food and water, preparing for nuclear war. Children practice duck and cover drills in schools. The world watches and waits. Soviet ships carrying more missiles steam toward Cuba. American warships take up positions to intercept them. In Washington, the tension is unbearable. Will the Soviet ships stop, or will they challenge the quarantine? If they challenge it, will American ships fire? If they fire, will the Soviets retaliate? The questions cascade, each more frightening than the last. Secretary of State Dean Rusk watches the Situation Board. He says that the 2 ships are eyeball to eyeball. Then comes word that the Soviet ships have stopped. Rusk exhales. We're eyeball to eyeball, and I think the other fellow just blinked. But the crisis is not over. The missiles already in Cuba remain. Work on the sites continues. American military forces move to DEFCON 2, one step below actual war. Bombers are in the air, ready to strike. Missiles are armed and targeted. Submarine commanders receive sealed orders to be opened if contact with headquarters is lost. The world teeters on the brink. On October 26th, Khrushchev sends Kennedy a long, emotional letter. He offers to remove the missiles if Kennedy promises not to invade Cuba. Kennedy and his advisors debate how to respond. Before they can, a second letter arrives. This one demands that America remove its missiles from Turkey in exchange for removing Soviet missiles from Cuba. The terms have changed. The crisis deepens. An American U-2 is shot down over Cuba, killing the pilot. Military advisors urge Kennedy to retaliate, to launch strikes immediately. Kennedy refuses. He makes a brilliant strategic decision. He will respond to Khrushchev's first letter and ignore the second. He will accept the offer to remove the missiles in exchange for a promise not to invade Cuba. Through his brother Bobby, Kennedy also sends a private message. America will remove the missiles from Turkey, but not as part of a public deal. It must appear that Khrushchev backed down under American pressure. It is creative diplomacy, giving Khrushchev what he needs while maintaining American credibility. On October 28th, Khrushchev accepts. The Soviets will remove the missiles from Cuba. The crisis is over. Kennedy has won, but it is not the victory some had wanted. There is no invasion of Cuba. Castro remains in power. The Bay of Pigs is not avenged. But Kennedy understands what really happened. The world faced nuclear annihilation and stepped back from the abyss. That is the only victory that matters. In the months that follow, Kennedy and Khrushchev establish a direct communications link, the so-called hotline, to prevent future misunderstandings. They begin negotiating a ban on atmospheric nuclear testing. The Cold War continues, but both leaders have seen the darkness and pulled back. They are more cautious now, more aware of how easily things can spiral out of control. Kennedy's handling of the Cuban Missile Crisis establishes his reputation. He is no longer the inexperienced young president who stumbled at the Bay of Pigs. He is a leader who kept his nerve under unimaginable pressure, who thought clearly when others panicked, who saved the world through a combination of strength and wisdom. His approval ratings soar. Americans feel safe with him in the White House. The world breathes easier. John F. Kennedy has passed the ultimate test of leadership. By 1963, the Kennedy administration has found its rhythm. The president is more confident, more comfortable in his role. His relationship with Congress is improving slightly. His foreign policy, after the Cuban Missile Crisis, commands respect. His personal popularity remains high. Jackie Kennedy has become an international icon, bringing culture and elegance to the White House. She renovates the executive mansion, turning it into a showcase for American art and history. She hosts classical concerts and Shakespearean performances. She speaks French to visiting dignitaries. She is grace personified, and the world is enchanted. The Kennedys represent something new in American life. They are young, beautiful, sophisticated. They have style. They seem to embody the best of America, its optimism and energy and creativity. The White House under the Kennedys becomes Camelot, a magical place where brilliance and beauty reign. It is partly real, partly myth. The reality includes Kennedy's chronic health problems, his continuing infidelities, the constant pain he endures but never discusses publicly. But the myth is powerful. Americans want to believe in Camelot. They want to believe that their leaders are not just competent but inspiring. The Kennedys give them that belief. In June 1963, Kennedy travels to Europe. In West Berlin, he delivers one of the great speeches of the Cold War. He stands before the Brandenburg Gate, the wall behind him, and declares his solidarity with the people of Berlin. He says that freedom has many difficulties and democracy is not perfect, but we have never had to put a wall up to keep our people in. He says that all free men, wherever they may live, are citizens of Berlin. And then, in halting but powerful German, he declares, "Ich bin ein Berliner." I am a Berliner. The crowd erupts. 200,000 West Berliners roar their approval. They understand that America stands with them, that Kennedy stands with them. It is a moment of pure emotion, of connection across language and culture. Kennedy has given voice to the aspirations of people living under the shadow of communism. He has reminded the world what America represents. But at home, the nation is fracturing. Civil rights demonstrations spread across the South. In Birmingham, children march and are arrested. Images of brutality against peaceful protesters appear on television every night. The violence is shocking, undeniable. Northern whites, previously indifferent to Southern segregation, begin to demand action. The moral clarity of the civil rights movement is impossible to ignore. Black Americans are asking for nothing more than the rights promised by the Constitution. They are doing so nonviolently with dignity and courage, and they are being beaten, arrested, killed for it. In August 1963, 250,000 people march on Washington. They come by bus and train and car from across America. They gather at the Lincoln Memorial for the largest demonstration for civil rights in American history. Martin Luther King Jr. stands on the steps where Lincoln's statue gazes out over the mall. He delivers an address that will stand as one of the greatest pieces of American oratory. He speaks of his dream, a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed, a dream that his children will be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. The crowd listens in silence, then erupts in cheers. Kennedy watches on television from the White House. He invites King and other civil rights leaders to meet with him afterward. He is moved by the march, impressed by its size and peaceful character. He knows that change is coming, whether the South likes it or not. But change is violent. In September, 4 little girls are killed when a bomb explodes at the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham. They are attending Sunday school. They are children. Their names are Addie Mae Collins, Cynthia Wesley, Carol Robertson, and Carol Denise McNair. The bombing shocks the nation. Even white Americans who had been indifferent to civil rights are horrified. Children murdered in church. It is evil, pure, and simple. Kennedy denounces the bombing. He sends investigators. But he knows words are not enough. The civil rights bill he proposed in June is bogged down in Congress. Southern senators are filibustering, using procedural tactics to prevent a vote. Kennedy applies pressure, but progress is slow. The wheels of government turn slowly, too slowly for people dying in the streets. Kennedy's focus turns toward re-election. It is 1963. The campaign for 1964 is already beginning. Kennedy needs to shore up support in key states. Texas is a problem. The Democratic Party there is split between liberals and conservatives. Lyndon Johnson's influence has waned. Kennedy decides to make a trip to Texas in November. He will visit several cities, trying to unify the party and raise money. Jackie will come with him, her first major political trip since the 1960 campaign. She has been reluctant to participate in politics, preferring to focus on her children and her cultural projects. But Jack needs her. Her presence will generate excitement and press coverage. She agrees to go. The trip is planned for late November. Dallas will be one of the stops. Some advisors are concerned. Dallas is a conservative city, hostile to Kennedy. There have been incidents. Adlai Stevenson was spat upon and struck by a protester during a visit to Dallas just weeks earlier. But Kennedy dismisses the concerns. He is the president. He needs to go where the votes are. Dallas is important. The trip will proceed as planned. The morning of November 22, 1963, dawns clear and warm in Dallas. Air Force One touches down at Love Field shortly before 11:30 a.m. Central Time. President and Mrs. Kennedy step off the plane into bright Texas sunshine. Jackie is wearing a pink suit with a pillbox hat. She looks radiant. The crowd at the airport roars its approval. The Kennedys work the fence line, shaking hands, greeting well-wishers. The president is in good spirits. The trip has gone well so far. Houston was friendly. San Antonio was enthusiastic. Fort Worth this morning was welcoming. Dallas, so far, seems no different. The motorcade forms. President and Mrs. Kennedy climb into the back seat of a dark blue 1961 Lincoln Continental convertible. Texas Governor John Connally and his wife Nellie sit in the jump seats in front of them. Secret Service agents ride in the follow-up car. The motorcade winds through downtown Dallas. Crowds line the streets. People cheer, wave, hold up signs. The route has been published in the newspapers. Everyone knows the president is coming. At one point, Mrs. Connolly turns to Kennedy and says, "Mr. President, you can't say Dallas doesn't love you." Kennedy smiles. "That is very obvious," he replies. The motorcade turns onto Elm Street, beginning its descent toward the Triple Underpass. Dealey Plaza opens before them. The Texas School Book Depository looms on the right, a 7-story brick building. Ahead, a grassy knoll rises to the right. The motorcade slows for the turn. The crowds are thinner here, but people still line the route. Some are filming with home movie cameras. Abraham Zapruder stands on a concrete pedestal with his camera, capturing what will become the most analyzed film footage in history. The time is 12:30 p.m. 3 shots ring out. The first misses. The second strikes Kennedy in the upper back, exits through his throat. Governor Connolly is also hit by this bullet or by a separate shot. The third shot strikes Kennedy in the head. The impact is catastrophic. Jackie screams. She climbs onto the trunk of the moving car, trying to retrieve a piece of her husband's skull. Secret Service agent Clint Hill runs from the follow-up car and pushes her back into the seat, throwing himself over the President and First Lady as the car accelerates toward Parkland Memorial Hospital. Chaos erupts. At Parkland, doctors work frantically to save the President, but the head wound is too severe. Nothing can be done. At 1 p.m. Central Time, White House Press Secretary Malcolm Kilduff makes the announcement. President John F. Kennedy died at approximately 1 o'clock Central Standard Time today here in Dallas. He pauses, struggling with his emotions. He died of a gunshot wound in the brain. Within hours, police arrest Lee Harvey Oswald, a 24-year-old employee of the Texas School Book Depository. Oswald is a drifter, a former Marine who defected to the Soviet Union and then returned. He has a rifle, a mail-order Italian carbine. He is charged with murdering a Dallas police officer and with assassinating the president. He denies both. "I'm just a patsy," he tells reporters. 2 days later, while being transferred between jails, Oswald is shot and killed by Jack Ruby, a Dallas nightclub owner. Ruby claims he wanted to spare Mrs. Kennedy the ordeal of a trial, but his action ensures that many questions will never be answered. The truth of what happened in Dealey Plaza becomes the subject of endless debate and conspiracy theories. On Air Force One, still at Love Field, Lyndon Johnson takes the oath of office at 2:38 p.m. Jackie Kennedy stands beside him, her pink suit stained with her husband's blood. She has refused to change clothes. She wants the world to see what they have done. The photograph of Johnson being sworn in, Jackie standing beside him in shock, becomes one of the defining images of the century. Johnson promises continuity. He will carry on Kennedy's programs, honor Kennedy's legacy. But everything has changed. In an instant, the hope and optimism of the Kennedy years have been shattered. The nation enters a period of grief unlike anything in living memory. Television networks suspend regular programming. For 4 days, from the assassination on Friday until the funeral on Monday, the country does nothing but mourn. Schools close, businesses close, people stay home, glued to their television sets, watching the endless coverage. The images sear themselves into memory. Jackie Kennedy, stunned and silent, descending from Air Force One, still wearing the blood-stained suit. John Jr., turning 3 years old on the day of his father's funeral. The riderless horse in the funeral procession, boots reversed in the stirrups, an ancient symbol of a fallen warrior. The eternal flame that Jackie lights at Arlington National Cemetery, burning forever at her husband's grave. World leaders come to Washington for the funeral. Charles de Gaulle of France, Haile Selassie of Ethiopia, Prince Philip representing Queen Elizabeth. Leaders from 92 countries walking behind the caisson that carries Kennedy's coffin from the White House to St. Matthew's Cathedral. The funeral mass is solemn, heartbreaking. Cardinal Cushing, who married Jack and Jackie 10 years earlier, presides. Tenor Luigi Vena sings the Ave Maria. Jackie and her children sit in the front pew. Caroline is 5 years old. John Jr. is 3. They do not fully understand what has happened. As the coffin is carried from the church, the military pallbearers pause. John Jr. steps forward and salutes his father's casket. The image breaks hearts around the world. A small boy saying goodbye to his father. A son honoring the president. Innocence and loss captured in a single gesture. The funeral procession moves to Arlington National Cemetery. Kennedy had visited Arlington just weeks earlier, on Veterans Day. He had stood at the graveside of a friend and remarked on the view. He wanted to be buried there, Jackie later says. On this cold November afternoon, he is laid to rest on a slope overlooking Washington. Jackie lights the eternal flame. Taps echoes across the hillside. Fighter jets fly overhead in missing man formation. 50 guns fire a salute. The ceremony ends. The nation has said goodbye to its president. But the mourning does not end. In the days and weeks that follow, millions of Americans struggle to make sense of what happened. How could this occur in America? How could a president, beloved by so many, be struck down in broad daylight? The questions haunt the country. President Johnson appoints a commission led by Chief Justice Earl Warren to investigate the assassination. The Warren Commission will conclude that Oswald acted alone, that there was no conspiracy, but many Americans refuse to believe it. The theories multiply. The Mafia, the CIA, the Soviets, Cuban exiles angry about the Bay of Pigs, Vice President Johnson himself. The accusations are wild, unsupported, but they persist. The assassination becomes an open wound in the American psyche, never quite healing, always generating new questions and theories. Jackie Kennedy retreats from public life. She moves to New York with her children. She guards their privacy fiercely. She refuses to exploit her status as the widowed First Lady. She remarries in 1968 to Greek shipping magnate Aristotle Onassis, shocking many who feel she has betrayed Kennedy's memory. But she is done living for other people's expectations. She has sacrificed enough. She spends the rest of her life protecting her children and preserving her privacy. She works as an editor in New York publishing houses. She is seen at cultural events, always elegant, always private. She gives few interviews. She does not write a memoir. The details of her marriage to Jack Kennedy, the good and the bad, remain largely private. She dies in 1994, and her secrets die with her. Robert Kennedy is shattered by his brother's death. The two were closer than anyone knew. Bobby had been Jack's enforcer, his closest advisor, his truest friend. Now he is adrift. He remains as Attorney General under Johnson, but the relationship is strained. Johnson resents the Kennedys, resents living in Jack's shadow. Bobby eventually leaves the administration. In 1964, he runs for Senate from New York and wins. He becomes a voice for the poor, for civil rights, for peace in Vietnam. In 1968, he runs for president himself. He wins the California primary on June 5, 1968. That night, in the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, he is shot by Sirhan Sirhan, a Palestinian angry about Kennedy's support for Israel. Bobby dies the next day. Two Kennedy brothers, both struck down by assassins. The tragedy compounds. The mythology deepens. Edward Kennedy, the youngest brother, survives the longest. He serves in the Senate for 47 years, becoming one of the most effective legislators in American history. But he too is marked by tragedy. In 1969, he drives his car off a bridge at Chappaquiddick, killing a young campaign worker, Mary Jo Kopechne. The scandal damages his presidential aspirations forever. He runs in 1980 but loses the nomination to Jimmy Carter. He remains in the Senate, fighting for health care, education, civil rights. He becomes the liberal lion, carrying the Kennedy torch into the 21st century. He dies in 2009, the last of the Kennedy brothers, leaving behind a complicated legacy of public service and personal failure. Act 11. Legacy. What did John F. Kennedy accomplish? What did his brief presidency mean? The questions are more complex than they first appear. Kennedy served only 1036 days as president, not quite 3 years. Many of his initiatives were incomplete at his death. The civil rights bill he proposed passed in 1964 under Johnson. The Vietnam War, which Kennedy escalated but did not fully commit to, became Johnson's nightmare. The Cold War continued for another 28 years after Kennedy's death. The moon landing happened in 1969, fulfilling Kennedy's vision but under another president's watch. Yet Kennedy's impact transcends legislation and policy. He changed how Americans thought about their government and themselves. He made public service attractive, even glamorous. He challenged Americans to ask what they could do for their country. He created the Peace Corps, sending thousands of young Americans abroad to help developing nations. He inspired a generation to enter politics, to believe that government could be a force for good. Before Kennedy, politics was often seen as a grubby business, the domain of backroom dealers and machine bosses. Kennedy made politics seem exciting, important, worthy of the best and brightest minds. Kennedy's rhetoric elevated American political discourse. His speeches were not just policy statements, but literature. He spoke of America's mission in the world, of the responsibility that comes with power, of the need for courage and vision. His inaugural address remains one of the greatest presidential speeches ever delivered. His Berlin speech rallied the free world. His address announcing the quarantine during the Cuban Missile Crisis was a masterclass in crisis communication. His civil rights address in June 1963 finally articulated the moral dimension of the struggle for equality. These were not just words. They were articulations of values, visions of what America could become. The space program is Kennedy's most tangible legacy. When he challenged America to reach the moon, the technology barely existed. The rockets were unreliable. The spacecraft were primitive. No one knew if it was even possible. But Kennedy's challenge mobilized a nation. NASA received unprecedented funding. Universities trained a new generation of scientists and engineers. Private industry developed new technologies. The Apollo program became a unifying national project, something Americans of all backgrounds could support and take pride in. On July 20, 1969, Neil Armstrong stepped onto the lunar surface. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Kennedy did not live to see it, but it was his vision realized. America had done the impossible because a president challenged them to try. Civil rights is a more complicated part of Kennedy's legacy. He moved slowly, hesitantly, constrained by political calculations. But he ultimately came down on the right side of history. His civil rights address in June 1963 reframed the issue as a moral imperative, not just a political question. His Justice Department, under Bobby Kennedy, aggressively pursued voting rights and school desegregation. Kennedy appointed unprecedented numbers of Black Americans to federal positions, including Thurgood Marshall to the Federal Appeals Court. Marshall would later become the first Black Supreme Court justice. Kennedy did not lead the civil rights movement, but he eventually supported it, using the power of the presidency to advance the cause of equality. The Cuban Missile Crisis remains Kennedy's finest hour. His handling of the crisis demonstrated wisdom, courage, and restraint. He resisted pressure from military advisors who wanted to bomb Cuba immediately. He found a diplomatic solution that allowed both sides to back down without losing face. He prevented nuclear war. In the aftermath, he worked to reduce tensions with the Soviet Union. He negotiated the Limited Nuclear Test Ban Treaty in 1963, the first arms control agreement of the Cold War. He spoke at American University about the need for peace, about recognizing our common humanity even with adversaries. These were the actions of a leader who had looked into the abyss and understood the stakes. But Kennedy's presidency also had significant failures and limitations. He escalated American involvement in Vietnam, sending thousands of military advisors and beginning the commitment that would eventually lead to full-scale war. He authorized covert operations against Cuba that violated international law and achieved nothing. His personal behavior, the compulsive womanizing that continued even in the White House, was reckless and demeaning to Jackie and to the office he held. His health problems, hidden from the public, raised questions about whether he was fully capable of handling the physical and mental demands of the presidency. These aspects of Kennedy's life complicate the legacy, adding shadows to the bright myth of Camelot. Yet the myth persists, and perhaps that is part of the legacy too. The idea of Camelot, of a brief shining moment when everything seemed possible, resonates because Americans want to believe in it. They want to believe that leadership matters, that individuals can make a difference, that America can be better than it is. Kennedy embodied that hope. His youth, his eloquence, his vision of what America could become inspired millions. The assassination transformed him into a martyr, forever young, forever promising, never having to deal with the compromises and failures that come with age and experience. The Kennedy legacy lives on in many forms. In the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum in Boston, where his papers and artifacts are preserved. In the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts in Washington, a living monument to his appreciation for culture and the arts. In the countless schools, streets, and buildings named in his honor. In the Peace Corps volunteers who still serve around the world. In the space program that continues to push the boundaries of human achievement. In the generations of politicians who entered public service inspired by his example. The Kennedy family became American royalty, their triumphs and tragedies playing out in the public eye for decades. Caroline Kennedy, Jack's daughter, became an author, attorney, and diplomat, serving as ambassador to Japan under President Obama. John Jr. grew into a handsome, charismatic young man who seemed destined for politics, but he died in a plane crash in 1999, another Kennedy tragedy. Continued the family tradition of public service, carrying forward the torch first lit by John F. Kennedy. Patrick Kennedy, the son of Ted Kennedy, served in the U.S. House of Representatives from Rhode Island and became a leading advocate for mental health awareness. Joseph P. Kennedy II, Robert's son, served as a congressman from Massachusetts, focusing on social and economic justice. His son, Joe Kennedy III, later held the same seat and continues to play a role in national politics. Kathleen Kennedy Townsend served as Lieutenant Governor of Maryland. Even beyond elected office, the Kennedy influence permeates American public life through philanthropy, advocacy, and the enduring ideal that service to others is the highest calling. The family's story remains woven into the fabric of American identity. Generations born long after 1963 still recognize the name, the image, the voice, the cadence of Kennedy's speeches, the grainy black and white footage of his press conferences, the photographs of Jack and Jackie on the White House lawn, all evoke a sense of lost promise, of what America once dared to be. Every few years, documentaries, films, and books revisit his life, seeking to uncover new insights or solve lingering mysteries. But perhaps what endures most is not the mystery, but the inspiration. John F. Kennedy's presidency marked a turning point between the old world and the modern age. He led America at the dawn of television politics, when images began to matter as much as ideas. His charm, wit, and eloquence translated perfectly to this new medium. He made the presidency visible, accessible, human. His televised press conferences were witty, sharp, and informative, showing a leader in command but never distant. He made Americans feel that their president was speaking directly to them, inviting them to be part of the nation's story. Internationally, Kennedy projected both strength and compassion. He sought to balance America's power with a sense of responsibility. In his 1963 American University speech, delivered just months before his death, he called for a re-examination of attitudes toward the Soviet Union, urging peace not through fear, but through understanding. For, in the final analysis, he said, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's future, and we are all mortal. Those words, simple yet profound, captured Kennedy's humanity and vision. They remain as relevant today as they were 6 decades ago. Over time, historians have re-examined Kennedy's presidency with more nuance. Some argue he was more style than substance, that his short time in office left little concrete change. Others counter that his legacy lies not only in what he did, but in what he inspired. The New Frontier was not just a policy agenda. It was a mindset. The belief that America could reach beyond its limits, that citizens could make the world better through courage and commitment. It was a call to action that still resonates in classrooms, in service programs, and in politics. Even the flaws of Kennedy's life contribute to his complexity. He was a man of contradictions, bold and cautious, idealistic and pragmatic, faithful to his vision but unfaithful in his personal life. He lived with constant pain but never revealed it publicly. He embodied hope while privately fighting weakness. These contradictions make him human, not a marble statue, but a man who struggled and still managed to inspire millions. In the decades after his death, Kennedy's vision continued to shape American ambitions. His call to explore the new frontier extended beyond space exploration into technology, science, and civil rights. The Peace Corps he created became a global symbol of goodwill. The test ban treaty he championed opened the door to further arms control agreements. His ideas about civic engagement inspired movements from environmental activism to humanitarian aid. Even in popular culture, Kennedy's idealism became shorthand for a time when leadership was aspirational and moral clarity still seemed possible. Each November, Americans pause to remember that day in Dallas, to reflect not just on the tragedy, but on what was lost and what remains. The eternal flame at Arlington continues to burn, visited by millions who stand in silence before the simple white cross. They come not only to honor a president, but to reconnect with an idea that leadership grounded in hope can still guide a nation forward. For many, Kennedy's life represents the enduring belief that one person's vision can change the world. As the years pass, the myth of Camelot grows softer around the edges, but its core remains bright. It endures because it is not only about one man, but about a generation, about the optimism of a country that believed it could reach the moon, and injustice and secure peace. It reminds America of what it can be when courage and imagination meet. John F. Kennedy's story is, ultimately, America's story, of triumph and tragedy, of vision and vulnerability, of hope that refuses to die. His life was brief, his presidency shorter still, but his influence stretches across time. He left behind not just a legacy of policy, but a challenge, to dream boldly, to act bravely, and to believe that the future belongs to those who are willing to build it.